Well, if you thought it was hot in Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, you should try being in Paris. It's certainly very warm. I've just cycled between St Nazaire and Gare de Bercy, and the directions have been quite difficult because Google decided to pack up on the phone because the phone wanted a rest. It had actually become too hot to operate, and it said sorry, turning off until it cools down. So it's been an interesting trip so far, having left Fishbourne around about 9 o'clock on last night. Had an interesting trip over on the Brittany economy ferry. It's not especially comfortable, hasn't got a great range of facilities, but I suppose it is cheap. And then waited around for the train at about midday from Le Havre down to Paris St Nazaire. Interesting trip, as I say. It's incredibly hot, and I'm just extremely grateful that the intercity train is actually air conditioned. It means a lot. So, what's new after a very difficult crossing of Paris in around about 32 degrees centigrade? I arrived at Nazaire at around about 6 o'clock in the evening, and music festival on, great fun, usual thing, beers, music, very nice. Hot night. Decided to stay in Nazaire for a second night and had the opportunity to look at the cathedral. The cathedral's actually stunning. It was completely rebuilt, bombed very badly in 1944, rebuilt from 1948 onwards. It's a magnificent building. The craftsmanship is just without equal. It's absolutely beautiful, and filled with the most modern stained glass, all between the 60s and the 80s, the like of which I've never seen anywhere in Europe. On then to the following day, on Friday, early start, cloudy, temperature at about 24 degrees. These things are important when you're cycling a long way. And during the day it rose to about 29. I stopped for lunch in La Charité-sur-Mer, La Charité-sur-Loire, and found a very nice organic restaurant and had a chance to have a good meal there. Moving on somewhat more slowly into the afternoon and stopping last night at St Nazaire. The quality of the surfaces for cycling on are really quite something, and I think the French could teach us in the UK a lot about providing good quality cycle paths. These are absolutely smooth, flat, beautifully tarmacked, very little rolling resistance when you're carrying a lot of weight on a bicycle, and an absolute delight, and of course absolutely flat, almost billiard table flat, magnificent. Anyway, after that, left St Nazaire. St Nazaire itself was actually quite a nice stop, particularly because when I arrived I asked a Dutch couple where the nearest bar was, obviously very thirsty, and they said, sit here, have a beer with us, and we spent about an hour and a half talking, and so that was great fun. Swapped a book with an English couple while I was there because I'd finished mine, and then left this morning at around about 10:15, quite a late start really, intending to stop at Bonnet-sur-Loire for lunch, and then go on to Briare for the night. In all about 56 kilometres, rather less than yesterday, which turned out to be about 76. So there we are. As you can probably see, we're here in Sully-sur-Loire beside the chateau, and it's been a very interesting 24 hours. About 24 hours ago, it is just about that, I was sitting in a small town beside the Loire and enjoying something to eat and drink, and got my book out, and the next thing I knew, the proprietress was shaking me by the shoulder and saying, a little too much sun, maybe a little beer, perhaps you should have a black coffee. And I think she was right. Anyway, pedalled on and then spent last night in Briare, which was an interesting place because there seemed to be all these old age pensioners with their amazing yellow tabards saying Security Briare, and it was some pains to find out what this was, but a bit later it all became clear. It was the 124th Congress of the Sapeurs-Pompiers, that's the French firefighters, and they'd assembled all their machinery and all their men, people on foot and also on in various vans and different lorries and so on, all gaily painted red, and somebody important, I've no idea, probably the mayor, was taking the salute at the end of it. Anyway, so that was interesting. And then on my way back, it was just about getting dark, and looking down to the canal, I saw a splash and was really surprised to see an otter just passing there. So really quite a delight. I must say the smells as I've come through the small villages by the Loire have been wonderful. Not the French toilets on this occasion, but the roses, the honeysuckle, and indeed the lavender. Really great smells. Anyway, I'm off for some lunch, and then we'll be pedalling on further towards Orléans this afternoon. Well, bonjour. As you can probably see, I've arrived here in Orléans. It's been a fairly quick trip, about 30 kilometres from Châteauneuf-sur-Loire, and this is the place where people come to just ease their feet. You'll see in a moment that from the other side of here is, perhaps you won't in fact, I'll have to turn this around for you. Here you are. So this is the fountain, and this is the place where people come to just make their feet comfortable before they continue. I'm intending to spend the night in Olivet, which is around about 4 kilometres outside the city centre, and then we'll be pushing on tomorrow. Weather forecast's not great for tomorrow, so we'll have to see how that goes, but after that, on the way to St Nazaire. Over and out. Good evening. Well, as you can probably see, I'm hunkered down inside my tent, actually erected behind a small hedge and out of the wind. It's already raining, and so I wanted to make sure I was in somewhere fairly tidy and warm and out of the wind as possible. The proprietor of the campsite says that it's going to be actually pretty unpleasant tonight with the risk of storm, so it's the first time I've got all the guy lines out on the tent, and they're holding it down well. Anyway, it's been an interesting few days, particularly because yesterday I stayed at Olivet municipal site, which is near Orléans, and met a Dutch guy called Han. He's a very interesting man. He talked at length about the hub dynamo that he had fitted to his machine, which enabled him to have a USB socket on his handlebar from which he ran his GPS and also his phone. I thought that was a great idea, certainly for keeping things charged. Anyway, we had a few beers and talked about cycling and various other things that he did. But of course, during the day, I'd not fared too well because south of Orléans, on the way to the campsite, a lorry had stopped and I was forced onto the concrete area used by the trams. And I hadn't realised at the time, but there's a small curb that separates the edge of the concrete area from the tarmac. And as I attempted to mount this, I came a cropper, fell off my bike and managed to graze my arm and also my leg, but that's as bad as things got. I was rather better off than Han, who'd done something similar just a few hours earlier. He had considerable aches and pains and also 5 stitches in his head, so I thought I got off rather lightly. Anyway, one of the things I discovered yesterday particularly was that I had a lot of pain in my wrists from cycling quite long distances, and I put that down to the fact that a lot of weight on my wrists while I was cycling. So I thought I would get some Brahma bars, which quite a lot of the other long distance cyclists seem to use. Now these are a bit like the Brahma cattle. In other words, the bars are shaped right round and you've got a variety of different positions to put your hands in. What I was particularly impressed with was the cycle shop, who agreed to take back the parts that I didn't need on my machine and to recycle them. We both agreed that far too many things were thrown away, and they said they would keep them. They couldn't sell them to their customers because they sold new stuff, but they had quite a few social customers who from time to time needed spare parts, and they'd keep them for those customers. So I thought that was really great. Anyway, weather forecast for tomorrow is not great. It's rain, possibly quite heavy. so I'll review whether I'll stay here for another night or not, but I'm glad to be hunkered down out of the weather and looking forward to cooking a good meal in just a few moments. That's it for today then. Okay, cheers. Well, hello. Here we are back in the tent again. Late start actually this morning. Heavy rain last night and heavy rain again this morning, and I hate packing wet tentage. So late start off to Chaumont-sur-Loire. And on the way here I stopped at a delightful rustic cafe. There was a little sign just at the top of the hill and it said stop here and have something to drink and eat. And I went in. There was standing by the gate was an old man of sort of traditional French peasant farming stock, who was very affable, but obviously only in French. And when I asked him where the coffee was, he said, "Oh, in there, in the barn." And I went into the barn and discovered what was really a fabulous honesty cafe. There was no one there. There was just, it was said self-service, help yourself. It seemed to be presided over by the dog Bella, a sort of Jack Russell derivative. And the idea was you helped yourself, and if you could afford to pay, you did, and if you couldn't, then you didn't. And it was so lovely to come across something that was really trusting like that. There was even access to the toilets which were in the house, and nobody was there checking what you were doing. It was just completely trustworthy, trusting. It was lovely, really super. Anyway, in Chaumont-sur-Loire, it's due to have a bit of a thunderstorm tomorrow. The chances are I shall probably stay here during the day and go and visit the chateau at Chaumont. I'm not a great chateau visitor, but I think if it's going to pour and we have thunder and lightning, it's going to be quite unpleasant. That's probably a good place to be rather than out on the road. Anyway, more later. Cheers then. Bye-bye. Well, good morning. I'm en route from Amboise to Tours. Having spent the day at Amboise yesterday because I've been cycling for a week solidly and I could really have done with a day off, so that's what I had. Anyway, it's bright this morning, cloudy bright. It's a little bit cool, around about 17 degrees, but getting warmer. You can see I've got a jersey on for the first time for a week. Not quite as warm as it has been, but yesterday was lovely. I bumped into a couple called Bob and Joe in a motorhome when I was trying to exchange my book for another one, and they invited me into their motorhome. We sat down, had wine, then had something to eat, and then spent about 3 hours together. And it's indicative of what a great time you can have when you travel on your own and you just bump into people who are prepared to be helpful, friendly, and very keen to share tales with you. So a great day. It was very wet yesterday in places, but nevertheless tent held up extremely well, and everything's packed, and looking forward to Tours, which is about 20 kilometers away. Probably go past Tours and camp for the night, but we'll see how we go. Anyway, that's all, folks, as they used to say. Well, good afternoon. We're part way, or rather I am part way through between Saumur and Angers, and we're about, I suppose, half an hour outside Saumur at the moment. The weather is cloudy bright, but it's a great change from the drizzly, mizzling kind of days that we've had. The sun did put in a brief appearance, but has gone again. This morning was early start over to the hypermarket and to pick up new supplies of gas, and of course it's one of the few places in France you can pick up the screwed gas containers rather than those little blue camping gas things, is in the hypermarkets. However, the one thing you don't count on is when you want to buy loo rolls. Now, those of you who've stayed on French campsites will know the toilets are usually pretty immaculate, but the problem comes when you just want to buy a single toilet roll or even just two, because hypermarkets aren't the place to do that. They come in 6s and 12s, so that's one thing that we've still got to sort out. Anyway, thought I'd like to talk about a couple of things that have been very helpful to me on my journey so far. There is a guide to Route 6, which is the 800 kilometres between Nazaire and St Nazaire, and it's published by an English company, written by an English guy, a cyclist and his wife. However, it's hopelessly out of date, and the guide I've been using is this one. It's Hachette's Guide, 2017-18, fairly expensive at about £15, but absolutely superb, documents the routes and all the most important things to see on the way, as well as campsites and other accommodation. Bang up to date, and also in this easy fold back thing that fits very well in the top of the bar bag, so you can see what's going on. The other thing, of course, is this hat. Now, this hat I bought many years ago. It's not exactly the height of fashion, but I bought it to protect my neck from the sun. Of course, we haven't had much sun, but I've been delighted it's managed extremely well in coping with the wet weather, which luckily it's sort of dried out as the weather improved. So well done hat, bought that a long time ago, found it in the wardrobe, and it has looked after me extremely well. Anyway, on to Angers, and probably be there about 6 o'clock this evening, but that's all folks. Cheers, bye. Well, good afternoon. I'm here in Angers, and if you're wondering why, it's because it's around about 30 degrees and way too hot for cycling today. So this is a day off. There's about 3 days worth of cycling left to get to St Nazaire, and it seemed that there was plenty of time to have at least this wonderful day in Angers. Angers is very well served with transport links, very good trams and buses, lots of open spaces, cafes around most corners, and a very interesting, vibrant sort of city centre. Lots of young people about and a lot going on, but lots of little corners you can get out of the sun and are really enjoyable. Now, I started during the last video and talked to you about things that I found quite useful while I was camping, and one other thing I was going to mention was the humble plug. Now, I don't mean the electric plug, I'm talking about a plug you use to stop the water running out of your basin or your bath. And I carry one of those largely as a result of my grandmother. Now, she was a very interesting lady. She was a commercial traveller during and after the war, and one of the things she always took with her was a bath and a basin plug on a piece of string. She realised that post-war hotels and indeed guest houses were usually missing those vital things, and it was very difficult to have a wash or a shave, not her, you understand, but her companion, if indeed they were out on the road. So a plug was something very important to take, and I've found that is a very useful item as well for camping. You'll understand there's a constant battle between what to take with you and what to leave out, what can you manage without, but a plug is really quite important, especially if you want to have a comfortable shave in warm water in the morning. Anyway, there we are. We're in Angers. I'm off to find an English language newspaper, and then I'm going back to the campsite, and just outside the gates is a lovely ethnic bar that serves absolutely wonderful pints of IPA with a real citrusy flavour. So that's where I'm bound. So that's all for today. Okay, bye-bye. Well, it's around about 9:45 in France, and people are settling down for the night, and the campsite is a bit quiet apart from the odd slamming door. I set off at 8:15 this morning from Angers, and on the way to Nantes, determined to break the back of what was quite a long journey, about 100 kilometres. The weather at 8:15 was fairly cool, pleasant, quite doable. It very quickly, though, by lunchtime became muggy, and I managed to stop at Ancenis for lunch, omelette and pichet vin rouge, as usual, and that had broken the back of the journey, leaving about 40 kilometres to go. After lunch became a lot hotter, and I must say it was quite a slog to get into to Nantes. Temperatures were 34 degrees this afternoon, which is very high, and the big mistake I made, of course, in coming to Nantes was picking the campsite in allegedly the centre of the town, and it turned out not to be. It's in the university quarter, and it's about 20 minutes, a very large, long hill to get here, and consequently very sweaty by the time I arrived, and also quite exhausted. But a quick pint soon put that right. Anyway, tomorrow is off to St Nazaire, which shouldn't take too long. It's a fairly short journey, and then that will pretty much be the end of things. But I was very cheered by something that happened today. I spoke with a racing cyclist who came alongside me at one point, and he explained that his father was German, and that at the age of 75 he'd made a trip from Berlin to Bordeaux on his own. So I felt suitably humbled, and thought there's hope for me yet. Anyway, as I say, tomorrow we are then going off to St Nazaire, and what was at one time the longest bridge over an estuary, which I'll talk about more tomorrow. Anyway, that's it for today. Sleep well. See you tomorrow. Bye. Well, I'm here, just across the water from St Nazaire at Saint-Brévin-des-Pins. I must say it's 800 kilometres completed, and the sun has come out. It's a warm evening, and I'm here at the campsite, which is basically sand under pine trees. So tomorrow the big event is getting over the bridge. Now, apparently the bridge between St Nazaire and Saint-Brévin was built in 1975, and at the time, at 3 kilometres, it was the longest bridge in France. Odd to think that it's more than 40 years old now, and very busy with traffic. There are allegedly 3 ways of crossing it. One is on foot, the other is by taking a taxi, and the third is by taking a bus, which allegedly has space for 4 bicycles. But my experience with French public transport and bicycles is not good, because it seems to me that most of the time you need to take all the bags off your bike and transport the bare bike, and then put the bag somewhere else, and that becomes depressingly difficult while everyone is waiting for you to complete that task. So I think probably it might be pushing over the bridge tomorrow. Into St Nazaire, probably get the TGV if possible from St Nazaire to Nantes, and then attempt to bring forward the ticket that I have for next Wednesday and ask if it can be dealt with on Friday. All being well, that means probably an overnight in Saint-Malo, and then the ferry back on Saturday. But we'll wait and see. It relies on officialdom being very flexible and helpful, so we'll see what happens. Anyway, this is David, over and out for the moment. Bye. So good morning, I'm finally on the ferry, having had a good breakfast, and left the campsite just outside St Malo behind. Although one of the most expensive, it was certainly the most comfortable site with great views over the port, and somewhere I'd quite like to return to. Now, I've been looking back over the weather that we've had for the last few weeks, and if you remember, it started off really warm, sunny and extremely hot, then deteriorated into 4 or 5 days of rain, which was really unpleasant, and I actually thought about going home at one point because it was so wet, and then later decided that to carry on, and indeed it's been very warm and very hot yet again. However, I think I've done quite well, because I spoke to a couple of cyclists who were there on the ferry today, and they said that they'd actually been bivouacking, and a tent was pure luxury, and they arrived in Biarritz in a storm and slept in their sleeping bags under a piece of tarpaulin, so they were travelling really light. Anyway, I've got about 8 hours journey ahead of me, and then I'll look back to being at home on the Isle of Wight. Thank you very much for taking an interest in these vlogs, and I hope they've been sufficiently entertaining for you, and that you've enjoyed them. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.